Last week, we began our Bless series about the interaction we have with people who don't know Jesus. Because we are God's plan for others to see and hear about Jesus. It's on us to show what God's love looks like to our neighbors, our friends, our family, and coworkers. We are blessed by God so that we can be a blessing to others. So for the next few weeks, we're going to go through the word bless and see how each letter stands for a way that we can show God's love to others. Last week was the letter B, which stands for begin with prayer. And this week is the letter L, which stands for listen with care. Because when we listen with care, people feel valued. Julian Treasure is a well-respected author and speaker on sound and communication. He has a few TED Talks on the subject and a number of videos on YouTube. And I noticed two in particular. There was one titled Listening, and there was another titled Talking so that others will hear you. Now, which of those two videos do you think had more views? Listening or talking so that others will hear you? Listening had 2 million views. Talking so that others will hear you, 15 million views. Pretty obvious that people want to be heard. They want to be known and to feel valued. All of us do. That's, I think, why we tend to talk more than we listen sometimes. I mean, there can be nothing more frustrating than going out with a friend, looking forward to catching up, only you never get a chance to talk, to share what's on your heart, because your friend is verbally vomiting on you for the next hour. And then as you walk into the parking lot and your friend finally asks, "Oh, how are you doing?" It feels pretty frustrating because you don't feel cared for. You don't feel valued. And then in return, you hardly want to listen well to that friend. But if we're honest, at least if I'm honest, I bet we've been on both sides of that table. What about this? You think about the explosion of social media in the last few years. People are longing to be heard by someone who will listen. So how about you? What kind of listener are you? How would you rate yourself? Let's say on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 being pretty mediocre, pretty quiet listener. You don't really pay attention much. 5 being like the sweetest grandma. Not the mean grandma, but the sweet grandma who listens and loves everything you say. What would you rate yourself, 1 to 5? What would a friend say? Someone you're sitting by, or maybe someone you could text, what would they say if you asked them what kind of listener you are? One of the places I see this the most is from the student ministry angle, because I'm always looking for Christians who have a growing faith, who can listen with care, without an agenda, and show empathy to our students. They make the best leaders in our student ministry. I remember one time I was having lunch with a potential leader, and we're talking about ministry and small groups and the importance of listening more than talking, and empathy and how important and valuable that is. When he kind of asked me, okay, makes sense. So when do I get a chance to tell them what they're doing wrong and how I can fix it? You know, when can I tell them, hey, they need to stop doing this with their phones and they could do this better? And when do I get a chance to do that? Well, it turned out to be a pretty short lunch, but it is kind of how it goes sometimes. On the other hand, though, I recently watched an interaction with my son Jake and myself went and visited an older friend of ours. We were hanging out and talking, and the two of us older guys were kind of doing the talking first, and then Jake and he started talking. And then Jake was telling stories, and he was asking questions. Then he was telling stories, and Jake was asking him questions. And before you know it, I just kind of sat back and was out of the conversation. It was the two of them just having a great conversation, asking questions, listening, laughing. It was a super great time. When we walked away from that time, I was amazed because Jake's heart was so encouraged and so full. He felt heard and valued because someone listened with care. And that's the dream. But so often, many of our conversations, even with family and friends, become a competition for personal broadcasting. You want to get your thoughts off your chest so badly, it almost doesn't matter if you're even understood. And when people don't really understand each other, you're just kind of competing to talk. And that's not a good thing because your relationship breaks down to you talk, then I talk, you talk, and I talk. And there's no understanding at all. Let's take a look at this video, maybe give you an idea to see what I mean.
Play. 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 Play.
What are you doing?
Trying to use a Jedi mind trick to control Stephen Hawking. Play. Ugh. He must be wearing a tinfoil hat or something.
I did a bad thing.
Does it affect me?
No.
Then suffer in silence. Play. Stephen Hawking.
Penny started taking a class. She wrote a paper. She didn't want me to read it. I went behind her back. I read it anyway.
Stephen Hawking hates me.
I don't know what to do. The paper's terrible. But if I tell her, she'll know that I read it, and she'll get really mad.
I was beating him so bad he doesn't want to be friends anymore. Why does everyone love me except Stephen Hawking?
Is it possible we're having two different conversations?
How would I know? I'm not listening to you.
Hang on. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. Chess clock. We each get 5 minutes to talk about our problems. We'll take turns. Each turn will consist of a statement and a helpful response from the friend. Begin.
I humiliated Stephen Hawking in a game of words with friends. He stopped playing, and now we're not friends anymore.
He's probably busy. You're worried about nothing. Give it a couple more days. I'm sure he'll play, and you'll see that everything's fine. My turn. I can't let Penny hand in a bad paper, but how do I tell her it's bad without letting her know that I read it?
Beats me. Now, I know Hawking's not busy because I can see he's playing other people right now.
Maybe since you're so good, he's taking his time to meet the challenge. I want Penny to enjoy school.
Wallace told me he's a big baby. I didn't know that, and I played extract for 82 points. Oh, it's all Amy's fault. She told me to play it. I've got to cut her loose.
Sheldon, I wasn't done talking. She hands in the paper tomorrow. I know I could help her, and she's my girlfriend. I should be allowed to help her. Why aren't I allowed to help her?
Yeah, I hear you, brother.
No. You need to give me some advice.
Fine. Women, huh?
No. Specific to my situation.
Blonde women, huh?
Empathetic.
It sucks to be you.
I quit.
Leonard, wait. No. I listened to your dumb thing. Leonard, come back. Leonard, come back.
What?
Oh, of course. It only works on the weak-minded.
Pretty funny video, but I mean, maybe not all of our conversations are that obvious, but I'm sure you've seen it happen before, where two people are more concerned with talking than with listening with care. Here's the thing though, as we go through our days loving God and loving people, it starts with our conversations. And it takes a lot to prove that you genuinely care for someone, but that begins with a conversation and listening with care. And the reason this is so important, you are the front door of the church. Your driveway, your classroom, your office, your front yard. People find out a lot about Jesus by their interactions with people who say they know Jesus. And if we don't listen with care, then are we really showing God's love to people? See, we don't get the chance to be a good church if we aren't good friends, good neighbors, good coworkers, good classmates. People won't come to our church unless they're comfortable in our driveway. And we have a chance to be the church for people before they ever even enter this building. Imagine this. I've read that Jesuit missionaries, when they move to a city and they're planning to start a ministry, for the first 6 months, they don't speak. They don't talk, they just listen. They just listen for 6 months. Now, I get it. That might be a little odd in your interactions if you never spoke. Maybe not perfectly practical, but you see the point though. There's incredible value in listening. And throughout the Bible, listening is key. The core of the Hebrew faith in the Old Testament is the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And the word Shema is the Hebrew word for hear. And it also means to kind of take action, to not just listen, but to respond to what you hear, to act on what you hear. funny part, in Hebrew, there's no separate word for the word obey, only Shema. You hear and obey. Hear, O Israel, and love God and love others. You hear this and you act. It's why the prophets would say they have ears, but they don't Shema. They don't listen. No wonder so many prayers to God in the Old Testament and even in the Psalms begin with Shema God. Hear our prayers. Listen. Do something. Please, God. See, listening is more than hearing. It's acting on what you hear. Real listening is listening with care. And you think about how Jesus modeled this in so many ways. He asked great questions and paid close attention to the answers, showing the other person that he valued them. Not only if they gave the right answer, but just because as a human being, they deserve worth and value. In Luke 10, it's a Good Samaritan story, and it starts out with a guy asking, what can I do for eternal life? And this could have been a slam dunk for Jesus. He could have said, oh, I got this. This is an easy one. Ask for forgiveness, pray the prayer, accept me, be baptized. Done. 1 point for the Christians. Instead, Jesus asks him more questions. He listens. He's paying attention to what's behind the conversation, eventually getting to the heart of the conversation, which ends with how important it is that you treat all people with grace. And that happened because Jesus listened with care. In Luke 18, Jesus is walking to Jericho, and there's a blind man begging for mercy. And he figures out that Jesus is there, and so he starts yelling louder and louder, Jesus, have mercy, yelling. And people around him like, shh, be quiet. Jesus doesn't want to bother you. You don't need him. But Jesus hears him, and he goes to him. And he doesn't just assume, oh, he's blind, he wants to be healed. Boom, healed. No. He listens to him, and he asks him a question. And the man ends up healed and encouraged because Jesus listened with care. In Mark 5, in the midst of a very serious situation, Jesus is on his way to help someone's dying daughter. And out of the crowd surrounding him, a woman touches him and was instantly healed of her nonstop bleeding. And Jesus easily could have kept walking or said, hey, we got a pretty serious situation. I'm sorry. Glad you're healed. Let's go, everybody. But no, he stops and he makes time for the woman and he listens with care. And as a result, not only was she healed, but she walked away feeling valued for the first time in a long time because he listens with care. In John 4, Jesus was talking with a woman at a well, and he asked her for a drink of water. And so a conversation that starts off talking about water ends up with Jesus sharing that he is the long-awaited Messiah that she was waiting for. And Jesus paid attention to the Samaritan woman's conversation and went to the next level. And there's all kinds of barriers and issues in this conversation that could have been, made Jesus afraid or worried. Social barriers, gender barriers, racial barriers. But Jesus jumped right into the conversation, not just to talk, but to listen with care. And because she felt so valued and encouraged, she ran home to tell everyone about Jesus. See, when we listen with care to people, they feel valued and they walk away with full hearts. I remember once I had a kid come into my office who wanted to talk. I'd never met him before, and he'd never even been to church before. So I was kind of surprised that he was so brave to come into a church. So it turns out he was raised in a Jewish family and didn't know much about Christianity, so he thought he'd ask some questions. And I thought, great, there's somebody asking about Jesus. I can totally answer this. Boom, boom, boom. We talked about Jews and the Messiah. We talked about Jesus and the life with Jesus. I nailed it. But I wonder if I didn't completely miss a chance to listen with care. I wonder if that's all he wanted. I wonder if, because I was so ready with my answers, did he feel valued as he walked away? Did he walk away with a full heart or just a full head loaded with information? I think I might have blown it. In 2010, the Museum of Modern Art in New York City hosted an exhibit by a performance artist named Marina Abramovich titled The Artist is Present. And for her exhibit, over 7 hours a day, every day for 6 weeks, she just sat in a chair with an empty chair in front of her. And people could come sit in front of her and just talk or whatever. She sat and listened over 7 hours a day, didn't say a word, just listened. Eventually, they had to have security. Eventually, the line got so long, people waited outside. The security saw this and were so blown away, they even waited in line just to have an experience with someone being so present. I mean, it's clear that our world, our friends, our neighbors, we all have a huge desire to be heard, to be known, to be valued. And it's also clear that Jesus calls us to listen to people with care. Imagine if we made a focused effort to listen with care to the people around us. How many people would feel valued at work or at school or at home or in our neighborhood? What if the people you knew that you cared just by the way you listened? What if they knew you cared just by the way you listen? What difference would that make? How would that impact their hearts? Here's just a few steps, I think. A few steps you could take towards being a better listener, okay? A good listener encourages us on. They say things like, go on, tell me more. Or, why did you say that? They encourage us, and they want to know more about us. They're curious. They want to find out more about our story. A good listener urges clarification. So when you describe something as cool or lit, and you ask why, what does lit even mean? And why is that a good thing? Okay, and then you understand. A good listener doesn't moralize. They're not surprised or afraid when you say something that they don't agree with. They just keep listening instead of judging. Otherwise, people become afraid to be honest with you because they know that you're just going to judge them. A good listener separates disagreement from criticism. Often those two get confused. You can disagree with what they're saying, but still care for them by listening, because disagreement shouldn't change their value. And a good listener pays attention to their body language, making sure their eyes aren't glazing over or they're zoning out as the other person's talking. They're not staring at their phone or being distracted. They are looking and listening with care to the person they're talking to. So last week, you wrote down a few people that you were praying for. This week, how can you listen with care to these people? What's one step this week you could take in listening with care to show them how much you value them, how much they matter to you? Jesus engaged people by asking questions and loving them through their conversation. Because when people are heard and understood, they feel safe and they feel valued. So get curious. Listen deeply to people's dreams and pain. Listen for where God is at work in their lives so that you can join in what God is already doing. And may you be a blessing by listening with care.